Hello and what's up? Today's deck, a group of decks that we're going to discuss is from a recent regional champs results, and which is this one is from the face-to-face games Tour Championship, Vancouver Cycle 2, which is also a regional championship prior to the qualification for the Pro Tour. So it was just ended last weekend, and I have been watching from the or reading the tweets or some other news of the matchups and the results. And finally, after that quite exciting part of looking forward on which deck to win, we finally have this sort of a final ranking after the qualifiers for the top 8 and also the top 8 results. So you can see here the winning deck is the Mono White Midrange by William LaHaye, and we're going to discuss this one, followed by the Four Color Legends. This is the finalist deck, piloted by Michael Van Vals, and also the top 4, including the Azores Soldiers by Boston's Scatman and Joseph Rani playing Rakdos Agro. And the rest is quite a variance, including also another Gixis midrange, which is probably the current popular deck. And Esper Legends also has been existing before the arrival of the Praxia All-in-One, and the new deck is also from the recent set, Celestia Toxic. So we're going to start with what this build would look like, starting off with what the mono white midrange would look now that it has finally adjusted so much in the metagame that has been really successful, even from the recent results that was done here in the Philippines. That was in Southeast Asia Championship done in Clark, Pampanga last week. So this is the mono white mid-range build. You can see it's more of a control-ish the setup because of only having 10 creatures here. So we can check the visual view. So we can be idle on the side. So we have, it's quite a combination of spells and lands. So we're going back. So we have Planeswalkers, 7 on this build, playset of the Wandering Emperor. The Eternal Wanderer is the newest version for Praxia All-in-One, and 1 copy of Elspeth the Splendid from Streets of New Capenna. And the creature choices includes mostly of the utility kinds, with the Qatar Commando to deal out artifact enchantments, Lauren of Third Path also with the same function, and a bonus card draw, Sanctuary Warden, a sort of a late game flyer angel with the few shield counters that cannot be easily destroyed by any spot removals or mass removals, and also Seraparagob that can bring back permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. Also included is 2 copies of Spirit Companion. That's basically an enchantment creature that just draws you a card and somewhat satisfies your deck requirement with the Roadside Reliquary. Now for the artifacts, we have Recurrent Buster, which is probably still, as mentioned in a previous video, the most popular card in the standard metagame, which not only gets you cards as a card source, but also becomes a 4/4 that can bash out for 4 with just a crew of 3 in open situations. And probably the basic component of white decks is the 4 copies of Winning Announcements and some Restoration Brigand that can later on flip into Architect of Restoration as another creature source. Now for the removals, we have Lay Down to Arms and Farewell. Farewell makes sure that the exile effects are very efficient in dealing with creatures that has some shenanigans with the graveyards. Along with it, we also have Destroy Evil. That's probably the instant card in the deck with only 2 copies, which can get you the option to destroy an enchantment or a creature with toughness 4 or greater. For the land choices, we can see basically here, they further improved the deck by having Demolition Field, aside from the usual Field of Ruin, because of the function that it can be very efficient in dealing with decks, let's say for example the 4-color or the 5-color decks that can destroy that non-basic lands to control, so that they will be able to disable the mana fix and also lighten up the effects of the bonding card that goes with the domain mechanic. So not only Field of Ruin, which gets you to destroy non-basic lands, but in respect they would be able to search for a basic land to replace it. We also have 4 copies of the Mission Field. This goes around at about $1 now in the market. That only good thing here is that not only gets you to shuffle and filter out your lands, but also get to destroy some of the efficient, or what you can say as the fixer of your opponents. So with that, we also partner with 13 Planes, Toll Road Side Quarry for a card draw, and Waniganjo of the City of the Empire as a channel utility card. So you can see here that the deck won't really demand more of the planes aside from the laden arms, but also the mana fix is not really hard for this deck to be able to get up and ramp up to its big spells in the late game. So for the sideboard, we just have going to go a quick run through some Scrib's Hive, probably for control with creating Dolomite tokens and win through poison effects. Depopulate for another source of smash removal. Faithful Absence for the utility of destroying any relevant creature or planeswalker at instant speed. Ossification also, that can basically enchant a basic land you control that can exile a creature or planeswalker as long as this ossification is into the battlefield. Then another 2 copies. This is the Sunset Revelry that is also very relevant against mono red aggro. You can get you 4 life, you can get 2/1/1 white human creature tokens blockers, and also a bonus card draw if needed. And also 2 copies of Licensers. This is mostly for mono blue with shenanigans of removing the graveyard and other effects that makes the Legion more powerful. And another copy of Elspeth's Descendant, learn the third path to have this utility creatures get the right combination of cards in post sideboarded games. Now for the second deck that is being probably not a breakout deck, but sort of a deck that has been able to play around some of the best metagame decks and the current standard, especially with the Grixis matchups, is this version of the 4-color Legends. So what we can say again with the Legends deck is that they have these cards with Plaza of Heroes, as you can see here. You can add mana many color that you can only spend to cast a legendary spell, or add a mana color among legendary permanents you control, and have this awesome extra effect that can have your target creature explode when destructible until end of turn. So 4 copies of this for a total of 29 cards. Surprisingly, you can see here, not pretty sure why it's 29, but with this setup, well, I'm not sure why it's 29, the main deck, but pretty much you can have more of these legendary creatures that can have the agility in the setup. Also, it's more of this build with Slogurt the Overslime. You can see here, whenever a card is put on graveyard from anywhere, put a counter on it. So that means that more probability of the land cards milled from the top card library or discarded, you can have counters placed on Slogurt the Overslime. And removing 3 of these counters, return it to the owner's hand. So when it leaves the battlefield, you can return to get land cards from your graveyard to your hand. So basically, some sort of mirror yourself, and then get your lands back, while at the same time getting your Slogurt and Overslime bigger for each of these lands added for a graveyard. So without checking on this usual setup, that combo goes well with the old Ratstein. So you can see here, when it enters the battlefield or at the beginning of upkeep, you will mill a card. So with the 29 cards in the build, you can basically go with higher chances of milling a land card. So if you mill the land card this way, you will create a token. If a creature is milled this way, you will create a 1/1 insect instead. And if a non-creature or non-land is milled, create a blood token. So with the ratio here of the creatures with 28 number in the list and 29 for lands, you can basically go with the value of having treasure tokens and 1/1 green insect token added to your board. Now, for not only going with the Ratstein sort of the utility creature, we also have some of the other cards. That's probably you can call it one. You call this as a 4-color Legends, but I think this is more of a 5-color, because covering also most of the cards, all colors of this setup. So we also have Melee Living Cure. So if you will get 1 or more poison counters, then you get 1 poison counter, and you can get additional poison counters this turn. So stopping out toxic decks with this creature. And also to have this option to exile it, choose another target creature or artifact. When it's put into a graveyard this turn, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So at the same time, being a 2/2 cost 3/3 on this one makes it a very efficient to drop and also a utility creature in dire situations. So for the rest of the lineup, which just going to wrap us up with Talia as the way to tax out your probably mid-range decks to control decks. We also have Shoulder the Tips. It's given also to have them lose 2 life whenever they draw a card. We also have Raffine Schemings here. You can see here as this is sort of a Raffine as per Legends deck, but covering also green to have this combo with the Rat's Time and Slugwork. We also have Lisa Sandslayer, the newest version of Lisa with a function of utility to have these effects whenever it deals combat damage to a player, removing counters and destroying enchantments, artifacts. And also Earthtide Resurrected, a sort of a counter spell, countering activated abilities, triggered abilities, and also destroying another creature or planeswalker, at the cost of having them to draw a card. In the late game, you can go with Out the Dice Sky, in which whenever it dies, you can have to put those any number of banana permanents with 12 mana value 4 or less from among them to your battlefield, and then you can also put 2 permanent counters on each permanent you control that's a creature or vehicle. So that's the die effect. We also have Denic, the single copy to have this effect to protect your graveyards from targeted spells or abilities, and a lone copy of Razorlash Transmogrant, which also benefits if an opponent has 4 or more than basic lands. The cost of returning it to battlefield was just basically 2 black mana. Now for the low instant in the Planeswalker choice, Skyto Suzuki for a card draw and also creating ninja tokens. We also have Go to the Throat as 2 copies of the destroying target artifact creature in this build. So last but not the least, the sideboard setup, along with the choices of having this spot removals against other aggro, counter spells of course for mid-range decks, additional Denics. We'll learn of the third path for artifact or enchantment shenanigans, and 1 of each copies of the Spell Pierce, some Planeswalkers, the Wanderer, Kaito Suzuki again, there's Lesson of Grant, and Fran, Breaker of Silence as an option also, since this is also considered as a legendary creature. So that is your second placed deck in the tournament, the 4-color Legends, and we go now for the third and fourth. We're not going to just wrap up some of this build in a bit. So just going to look at Azorius Soldiers. As expect also for the blue-white deck, this has not quite changed a bit, but this build has went to purely creatures with a new addition of the Skrull Defector Might. So basically protecting your creature from a certain color that you chose, with also the option to just pay 2 life instead of paying any white mana. So the rest are just pretty much basic for soldiers, Combat Officer, Thalia, Resolute Enforcements to produce also the bonus 1/1 white soldier trigger token, Valiant Veteran to pump their power and toughness, Siege Veteran also an option to put a counter and also protect them from such removals by creating those 1/1 glory soldier instead of whenever the token soldier creature you control dies, and Sky Strike Officer, which also a good flyer and card draw effect, and also can produce colorless soldier artifact creature tokens whenever it attacks. So what other inclusions? We have Denic, so source of soldier in itself, that protects your graveyards from exile effects. Harbin also, which has the bonus to pump out whenever you attack with 5 or more soldiers. Bulldog Qatar as a creature removal, also in Qatar Commando as a lone utility creature for artifact enchantments. For the land setup, that's pretty much the same. Darker Waste for 5 bit shed for the soldier mana creature type. Secret Coast as a new addition from Percha All Will Be One, and also Secret Courtyard by choosing soldier as a creature type for the mana fix. And of course, some of the utility creature channel lands like Ganju, Otawara, and Manland, which is Wandry. With the sideboard, the setup, it goes with just Lantern Flare. This is also a good effect to deal 6 damage to creature. Planeswalker, you gain X life. This looks to be indifferent, unlike some from the previous sideboard cards of this deck. Additional Brutal Qatar to exile opponent creatures, destroy evil also, to kill off enchantments, also for killing creatures with toughness 4 or greater, and Execution Specialist, a sort of a recursion effect by recurring a creature with mana value 2 or less from graveyard to the battlefield. But of course, the setup would just be have more creatures, if killed earlier, can be returned back with this human rogue. And then we have 2 copies of Protect Negotiators as counter spells, and Spell Pierce also, a sort of a cheap kind of 1 mana counter to deal with your opponent's spot removals. And last but not the least, to Cautious Welcome, with 1 or more creatures enters the battlefield, 1 mana value 3 or less, it will draw you a card and triggers only once. But the important thing here is that casting each of the creatures would basically replace your hand with another creature, basically, because of the card draw effect. So that is the third, but I'm very impressed by its record with the setup because of the, you can see here the record is basically 11-2-2. It has basically lost during the I think the semifinals. If you check here also, the Boston's in day 2 he's basically number 1 after the rank in the 10-1-2 record. So going to the top 8, he's number 1, but fortunately he lost in the semis. And last but not the least, we're going to go with the Rakdos aggro deck by Joseph Karani, but also Unix here, why it's called an aggro deck instead. But because basically it's an aggro, you can see here, instead of just having Bad Tide Harvester, we have 4 copies of Bloodthirsty Adversary, which can go with playing again instance with Play with Fire, Go for the Throat, Cut Down, and Obliterate. So aside with that, we have the physical Wave Fire Trespasser, in which the best combo here with the spot removal. After killing off the creatures, you can just exile them as it enters the battlefield or attacks. Exile them from the graveyard and have your opponent lose 1 life and you gain 1 life. So another option here is added Monasteric Sphere, which is a sort of a good 1-drop in this deck. You can consider hit because of the unique inclusion, wherein it still goes with a hybrid of Kumano Face Kakasan and a mid-range Fable the Mirror Breaker, which is also a popular card among the Rakdos mid-range decks. So very unique take on this. 24 lands and still to be a good hit with 4 Blacklead Cliffs as a new inclusion from Raisha will be 1. We're also having 1 of each of the channel lands as a utility card. So we can wait to check on this at the top 8. Before the top 8, Rakdos aggro is basically 9-2-2 on this rank, but facing 7 also has finally gave him a top 4 finish with this record 10-3-2. And last but not the least is the sideboard. Before we wrap up this video about top 4 results from the face-to-face game regional championship, sort of qualifier, but it's go the cycle 2 effect, the cycle 2 for Vancouver. We have sideboard of 4 copies of Bristol Transform Grant, basically for the mid-range and the 5 color decks. 2 copies of Duress, 3 copies of Bombard's Vengeance. This is maybe for the Soldier's deck because its ability to deal 2 damage to each non-vampire creature and creating blood token in the process. We also have 2 copies of Recurrent Buckbuster as a card draw for mid-range and a gas in the late game also. And 1 of each copies of the spot removals, Go for the Throat, Soul Transfer, and a Braid. So very unique, as you can say, as you can see here, the top 4 builds of this tournament. We can say that the standard is still a very healthy meta game to go with, even with the dominance, but not really dominance of the Grixis decks, in which we only had, if you notice in the top 8, we only have 1 Grixis mid-range and scene of this deck, but still that is probably still the popular deck and probably the safest deck to pilot here in the current meta game. As you can see here, it is going with the others of 29%, but 22% is more of the Grixis mid-range. So I think that's basically it for this standard metagame check with the results from the face-to-face games Tour Championship Vancouver Cycle 2. And if you like this video, you can check more of maybe you can have more of this kind of content as we go through and analyze each of the top deck finishers in some of the major tournaments held online and on face-to-face or could be in a physical kind of event around the globe. So that's basically it to wrap up this video. Thank you for checking this one, and see you guys in the next one.